welcome back, everybody. It's time for the Esports Connection, where the esports industry goes to connect. Streaming to you live from, well, we'll call it the center of the esports universe here today at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center, with a couple of guys who have been floating around the universe here for a while, and give us some inside scoop as to what pro esports looks like today with Jay DeShong. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for the intro, Paul. If you don't know, now you know. My name is Jay DeShong. I am the host for the Esports Connection here with my boy Big Will. He goes by Will Reardon. He is the former events manager for Envy Gaming and OpTic Gaming. Will, why don't you tell the people what you did in esports and where you're from?
From the Bay Area originally. Went to school at Cal Poly, Central Coast. And then after college, moved out to Dallas to work for Envy Gaming. And that kind of transitioned into, Envy Gaming, Dallas Fuel, Dallas Empire,
Sure.
all the brands we managed, OpTic Gaming, and I mean.
And so before we get all the way deep
Yeah.
into Envy and OpTic and all the esports things, right? Why don't you take me backwards a little bit? So tell me about how you got into gaming, how you got into esports because of gaming, and then where things went from there.
I've been gaming almost my whole life. I think my first console was the original PlayStation, PS1, Crash Bandicoot,
Yep.
I also won an Xbox in a raffle
That's
at school,
dope. That's
which was
awesome.
one of my coolest memories. is
sick.
getting that.
You gotta tell me about that. You can't.
Dude,
rush past
I mean,
that
it
one.
was just it was one of those school raffles, and I begged my mom to get tickets for the Xbox One, and just like any raffle, you buy the tickets and then you leave and you go home and you kind of forget about it. You're like, all right, there's no way I win.
Right.
And I remember playing around in the backyard one day. I was, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, something like that, and my mom's like, "Well, we won the Xbox," and I was like, "No way."
No way.
So I was stoked, but yeah, I gamed a lot with my cousins,
Sure.
with my brother. That was a big part. We would go on family trips, and we would all be, playing racing games together, Crash Bandicoot together,
Yep.
or Guitar Hero together.
That's how
So
we
it
were
was-
too. We did Mario growing up, so I
Yep,
get you. Yeah,
exactly.
Go ahead.
So it was really it was the way I bonded with my cousins and a lot of my friends growing up. So.
Sure. So how'd you go from winning an Xbox as an 8, 9-year-old, playing on PlayStation, playing Crash Bandicoot with your friends? How'd you go from that to kind of getting into the more competitive side of gaming being esports?
So, multiplayer gaming is really the transition point
Right.
there.
For all
right?
of us, right? Yeah, you
for
go
all
from
of
Madden
us.
to COD at some point, right?
Exactly. And COD is usually the first one.
Yep.
So COD 4, I think, I don't know, when I was 11 maybe,
Sure.
11 or 12. And my cousins were playing it, and I was like, that looks pretty cool.
That looks awesome.
I tried it out, and that really launched me in the direction of multiplayer games.
Sure.
I loved multiplayer games from then on. And then the game that really brought me into the esports scene was Overwatch.
Right.
I think like so many of us.
Right. Yep. Fortunately and unfortunately.
Fortunately and unfortunately,
Right.
which we need a whole different
Oh,
episode to talk about
yeah,
Overwatch.
it's a mixed bag of emotions.
That's
yeah.
a lot of heartbreak
Sure.
in that story.
Yeah.
But that was the game that I started watching the pro scene of,
Sure.
primarily, and the early tournament scene in 2016-17 when
Yep.
it first came out.
Grassroots still back then, right?
It really, yeah, it
Yep.
really was.
Yep.
Apex contenders tournaments.
Yep.
And it was a game alongside the pro scene being entertaining. It was a game that it felt different than
Yep.
any other game I played.
Right.
And
Felt
to this
new.
day,
Yep. I'm
there's
with
no
you.
feeling like early Overwatch days.
know
Nothing
exactly.
has been able to hit that itch like early Overwatch was.
Sure.
So
Pre-goats.
yeah, pre-goats,
Yeah.
the pre-goats Overwatch
Yeah.
for all of you who know what we're talking about.
right. Yeah. Sorry if
um,
you do.
Yeah, sorry if you do.
And don't worry about it if you don't.
Yeah, yeah. But Overwatch was really the launching point for me, because that's when I was watching it, and that's when I started educating myself on the esports scene as a whole, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't really know it was a thing until then, and I saw how big it was in all these different games, and it was a game that I played all the time and loved. And so I was an economics major in college, and
Sure.
for my senior project I did an analysis on the growth of the esports industry and
And
the
at that
gaming
point,
industry. And
before you did this project, at that point, had you considered esports being a career, or was it just kind of a dream? Like, how are you viewing esports
so this is
going into this project?
I didn't know it could be a career.
Sure, okay.
Realistically, I
Okay.
was like, but I started to learn about all the ways it could be. I
Right.
started to see the casters at the tournaments, and I was like, they're getting paid to do this.
Right.
And the people producing this are getting paid to
Right.
do this, and the athletes are getting paid to be
Right,
there. And
right.
I was like, so they're all doing this
There's
as a
some money in
job.
this,
I was
right.
like, someone's paying them,
Right.
So I started to look into it, and I looked more into the consumer side of things, and how massive of a demographic and a market gamers are.
Absolutely. One of the biggest now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and so and we can touch on that and what that's meant for the esports industry, good and bad.
Sure.
But that's how I got into it. Is that game? I started doing more research, and then senior project, and then I got connected with Jeff Moore, who was the president over at Envy Gaming at the time.
Rest in peace, Envy Gaming.
Rest in peace, Envy Gaming. Yeah, so Jeff was the president at the time, and recently hired, and so I got connected to him and sent him my senior project, and he was like, "Hey, you want to come work for free?" And I was like, "We're moving to Dallas."
Right. What else am I going to do besides my dream job, right?
Exactly.
So you start there for free, and then how long does it take to kind of get into the real world of esports? You start making money, mom stops calling you. What does that kind of look like? How do you go from nothing to something?
So I was an intern for, I think, 8 months.
I got it.
I was an intern.
Okay. How'd you survive that? Just grinding?
Man, just grinding, living with my aunt and uncle.
Got it.
Just grinding and kind of working on anything that they needed.
Right.
It was, at the time, there were 10 or 12 of us
Right.
total at the company, so it was still relatively small, and I think 5 of those 10 had just been hired as
Right.
well as soon as they moved to Dallas.
Yep.
So still very small, still just figuring out what we were doing and trying different things. So I was working on little projects. I made there was a period of like a month and a half, 2 months where my entire job was making Fortnite YouTube content.
My goodness.
Which is just so far from kind of my overall experience and
Sure.
interest. I didn't like Fortnite. I wasn't even into it.
Yeah,
But
we
we're
can
like,
say that.
but
Yeah.
Fortnite is huge. We got to capitalize on it. And I was like,
Absolutely.
and I'm willing to work on that.
Right.
So
I was the
me
same
and,
way when I was at State. We had to do Fortnite events. As much as I
we
didn't
had
play
to.
the game, you
Yeah.
had to do
We
Fortnite.
had to.
Yeah.
And that was actually a big kind of issue within the company. Some of us didn't think we should be doing Fortnite because
Sure.
it wasn't competitively viable, which
Right.
100% agree with. The others were like, it doesn't matter. There's numbers there. We need to do something. So
Sure.
anyway, I touched so many different parts of the business, and my first title at the company, which I make fun of a lot, is merchandise, digital marketing, and events coordinator, which is like,
I remember that. I think that's what I got introduced to you as.
like, what don't you do? You know,
Right.
it's like we were talking through. So what should your title be? And I was like, everything guy. Like, you can't put Swiss Army knife on a resume. So like, I don't know. Let's just name a few of the things.
Right.
But at the time, I was updating our website. I was helping with merch. I was, helping with our watch parties and events.
Right.
So it just jumbled them all into one. But it's really, that's the experience of esports for most people. I
Right.
think is you do a little bit of everything because it's so new.
Right.
It's so new.
Especially
and
back then, yeah. You were
especially
boots
back
on the
then.
ground, yeah,
Yep.
with a lot of these orgs. That I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here. That was kind of the beginning of the buttoning up of our industry. I would say that age that you kind of joined it. That was the beginning of what is now kind of known as the investor era for esports.
Exactly,
right?
and I love that you call it the investor era.
Sure.
Because I think that's a great way to look at it. That is right when the money started coming in,
Right.
and we started formalizing a lot
Sure.
of these organizations that started as dudes living in a house gaming together and then
And
traveling
around
to
what
tournaments.
time is this? You said 2017, 2018?
2018.
2018, gotcha,
2018.
gotcha. So you got a bunch of investors rolling in around 2018. So talk about that time changing. Talk about how you get in and you go from this Swiss Army knife to now there are more dollars involved. There's higher expectations. Maybe in some places you're expected to have results at a higher rate than before. Take me through what that transition was like, kind of living through it.
Yeah, so I got there right as the money started coming in.
Right.
And it was a really exciting idea at first. It's like, wow, we just got $30 million or
Right.
$50 million or whatever
Right.
to build what we want to build.
Right.
So it was incredibly exciting. We got to try so many different things. But pretty quickly, within a couple years, there was a lot of pressure.
Sure.
Because with significant investment comes significant expectations.
Absolutely.
The investors want results and they want them fast. And unfortunately, for esports, that pressure was put on, I think, at the wrong time.
Sure.
When the infrastructure wasn't built out yet, the revenue streams weren't built out yet, and so these expectations were really high, and nobody was hitting them.
Sure.
No company was. But we were making big steps. Homestand Weekend was another one of those big steps.
Well, so tell us about Homestand Weekend. Explain for the people at home who may not know exactly what Overwatch is, may not exactly know what an esports event is or what the Overwatch League is. Take us through what all those different things mean and what the Homestand Weekend meant to esports.
Right. So without diving into the different formats of esports,
Sure.
Because there's, you can compare it to tennis or golf, where
Right.
there's some games that have tournament scenes or circuits that you kind of run through, and
Right.
anyone can go and sign up. And this was the beginning of franchised leagues,
Right.
which was a big step from specifically Activision Blizzard. They wanted to own these leagues for Overwatch and Call of Duty,
Which are the titles that they produce.
exactly,
Right.
to turn them into the NFL.
Right.
That was the idea. That was
Right.
the elevator
That was the
pitches.
sell, right.
Exactly.
Yep.
And
For
so
how much a piece?
I think the buy-in was $25 million.
It was $25 million. Yeah. Go ahead.
If I'm remembering correctly. Which it's crazy to say that out loud nowadays,
Yep.
just seeing what happened with it all. But anyway, a big piece of that franchising game was geolocating these teams.
Right.
So we, our organization paid the $25 million to own Texas, or all of Texas and Call of Duty, North Texas and Overwatch.
Sure.
So that was our HMA, we called it, home marketing area.
Right.
We owned it,
Right.
right? So we were the only ones who could throw events there, who could market there. And the idea was to build up a local fan base, like with the NFL or the NBA.
Right, so you can eventually monetize it, or teams can look to
Exactly.
monetize it in different ways. Right.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so the first home game,
Sure.
quote unquote, home game
Right.
in esports history was Homestand Weekend.
Right, which is
hosted-
actually my official start in
Yep.
esports, and it was actually the place that we met. And
Mhm.
I'll let you tell the story because I kind of want to hear from your side, maybe the idiocy from me. So tell the people about Homestand, but at some point you got to
Yeah.
tell the people how we met there. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Homestand Weekend was the first attempt by a team, a geolocated team, as part of these franchise leagues to host an event. You
Sure.
know, it was supposed to be the equivalent of an NFL football game or
Right.
and
Why did
or
they
an NBA
pick?
game.
Why did they? Because we know from doing it, but why did they pick the Dallas Fuel to host that? Envy and the Dallas Fuel over other organizations or other teams. Do you kind of know why they picked you guys?
Well, we, despite our struggles competitively in
Sure.
the league, we had always had a very popular team.
Right.
You know, I think most people who are familiar with Twitch are familiar with XQC,
Right.
who's one of the biggest Twitch streamers, if not
One
the
of.
biggest Twitch streamer of all time.
Right.
Who was on the Dallas Fuel for a little bit. We always had big names, and we had the best team pre-franchise league going into it. So
Right.
we had always had the most fans in the league, and we were the most popular. And we also were the most equipped to,
Right.
if anyone was equipped at that point, to
Right,
host one of
right.
these
To be
events.
to be completely
Yeah.
fair for everybody, it was
Yeah.
hard for everyone, even
Yeah.
even with you guys being the most equipped. Right.
Right.
It was early.
But we'd hosted watch parties before,
Sure.
bigger ones than anyone else.
Right.
And our goal was to make live events a staple for us.
Right.
That was a big focus for our company
Right.
once we got into the league, was we want to be the guys that throw the best live events.
Sure.
And this was the first big swing at that.
Right.
At the Allen Event Center in 2019.
It was 2019.
I believe it
Yep,
was.
It was 2019. I'll never forget. Yep.
We had 5,000 fans show up every day.
Man.
Sold out crowd.
Bud Light Night was out there.
Yep, Bud Light
Favor
Night
was out
was
there.
out there.
GameStop was out
Yep.
there. There was a lot of folks out
Tons
there.
of sponsors, sold out crowd. It was electric. And so my job there was managing essentially the whole concourse,
Sure.
which is where all the activations were, all the sponsors were, and along with that, all the brand ambassadors that
Sure.
we had to hire
Yep.
to run that. I think
Right.
we had about 40 brand ambassadors.
Yeah, that sounds
we
about
hired.
right. Yep.
And one of those 40 was my friend Jay DeShong here, who drove over from Mississippi.
Did. It was 8.5 hours. Actually, we were going to take a bus, and we ended up, one of our Call of Duty players, his dad was a pilot, and he knew we were going to take a bus from Mississippi to Texas. And instead of letting us do that, he got us 2 standby tickets. Me and Jacob, my friend at the time, we went to Dallas together, gave us those tickets to come out and see you. So we didn't drive that time.
You
We
didn't
drove-
drive that time?
We flew
Okay,
that time,
alright.
and every other time after that. we
Every
drove.
other time you drove,
Not,
yeah.
about 8.5, 9 hours.
Uh-huh,
Yep.
So yeah, that's where I met Jay. He was one of the brand ambassadors managing the concourse and just kind of helping with whatever we needed. And my first task, I think, for him was, or my boss gave him a bunch of stuff and said, "Hey, go put this in Will's car." So I gave them my keys, and they went and put the stuff in my car. And, having recently been a college kid myself, I was like, I'm going to have to double check everything that these
To
guys
put it bluntly
do.
for everybody listening, Will was also a 19-year-old idiot at some point, and he just knew that I was a 19-year-old idiot, so he was
Correct.
checking after me.
And I was like, no disrespect, but I'm going to have to double check whether you actually locked my car or not.
And I made sure to, because you said to. So,
Yeah, and he triple checked, and he did. So I walked out to the parking lot right after they did, like almost watching them to see as soon as they were
I
gone.
remember,
I was
yeah.
like, all right, I'm gonna go see if they actually did it. And that was the first test
Sure.
for Jay. I was like, this is kind of the first test to see if I can trust them with
Yep.
with something where I don't have to watch, because they're with brand ambassadors especially. Some are great, some aren't, but you just have to find a few that you can trust
Right.
when there's a fire
Right.
at the event. Every event has fires going off left and right. where
Millions. Yep.
So much going on, and so much that you need to deal with all the time, that you just need a couple people you can rely on to
Right.
handle things while you take care of it.
Right. Sure.
And you passed the first test,
Appreciate
and then
that, yeah.
and then you kept passing the test.
I tried my best. Dude.
Yeah.
I appreciate you giving me all the tests, dude.
I
that
mean,
that I
hey,
could try
you
to
earned
pass.
them. You earned every
appreciate
one.
that. Well, and I wanna bring you back, because you mentioned something about electric and the concourse. I don't know if you remember where I'm going with on this, but
Of course.
the power outage that
Yeah.
happened during the first ever Overwatch League home. Take me through that, because the way that I think about it, was a 19-year-old idiot, right? Getting my start in esports. I've never seen so many rich people wearing suits running around like their heads just
Oh,
got cut
man.
off. I mean, the power went out the first ever Overwatch League home game. So tell me about that.
So, I mean, it was a dream up until then. We were like,
Right.
it was obviously hectic, and it wasn't easy, but it was going really well.
worth it.
The
Yep.
fans were loving it. It was
Yep.
great. And then all the power in the entire venue shuts off. And we're just stunned. Like for probably a full minute or two,
Right.
there are no words being said.
Oh, my
We're
goodness.
just looking around. Me and my boss and everyone we're working with, we're just like, is that it? Like, is this so? Did we fail?
Right.
Like if the
Where do
power
we
doesn't
go
come
from
back
here?
on,
We gotta call it.
are we ever going to do another one of these? Like
Right.
the future of esports is hinging on whether we
Future
get
of the
power.
Overwatch League. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it was the grid. The whole grid we were on was
The
out. It
whole
wasn't
city
just
grid.
the venues. The whole city grid
Yep.
went out. I've heard numbers on how long it was out. Someone told me it was out for 30 or 40 minutes.
Ugh.
For me, it felt like 2 minutes, because it was so hectic.
I'm
We
with
were
you.
running around trying to figure out what to do, trying to get back online. Where's the backup generator? How do we function without full power? Just running through all these logistical questions. And so I thought it was like 5 minutes. Apparently it was like 30 to 40.
It's
That's
like
what
an
I've
hour,
heard.
Right.
But I got to give credit to the Overwatch crowd who was there. They were great sports about it. They were they took it as a moment of excitement,
Right.
and as a moment of hype,
Right.
instead of being like,
What's going
this
on?
is so unprofessional. Like, oh, this is like, I'm sure if it was a Call of Duty crowd, they would have been like, this event's garbage. Like,
Would've
this
left by the
venue
time it
sucks.
came back on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. But the Overwatch fans, they were troopers about it,
They were.
and they used it to build up the hype. As soon as the power flicked back on and the match was like about to resume, everyone just went crazy,
Exploded,
and it was
yep.
the excitement was through the roof.
And carried throughout the entire weekend. right?
Exactly, through the whole weekend.
And on that, Will, so back then, everybody loved Overwatch. Everybody was excited about Overwatch. I would say that everybody in esports was excited about the future of esports. Things have changed a little bit since then. I mean, the Overwatch League just announced that they're doing $6 million buybacks for the teams who don't want to continue operation, right? A lot of teams are pulling out or moving their operations to completely different companies, right? Or countries. Tell me about why you think that's happening. Tell me about what your experience was like seeing things maybe kind of fall apart in esports. Tell me what that was like kind of being on the inside of the beast.
So I've thought about this a lot.
Yep.
And I've come up with a bunch of different answers as over the years and as time's gone on. But I think the big thing was the money came too quick.
Sure.
As soon as people started to see the numbers on the market of gamers worldwide, how many
Right.
gamers there were, how much they were spending on gaming peripherals,
Sure.
and how big of an opportunity that was, the investors immediately jumped in and started throwing money at every organization who had a fan base.
Right. And why do you think that is? I mean, just from your angle, why did you think that investors came in so quick and gave so much and expected so much? What do you feel like the reason was?
I think it's because of the market, the size of the market.
Sure.
I mean, the demographic numbers that we're looking at for
Right.
gamers worldwide.
Can you give people an idea? You got anything you can rattle
Not
off?
off the top of my
Sure.
head, but it's astronomical.
Right.
The number of people who game, the gamers worldwide.
Right.
rivals people who play sports worldwide.
Right, because a lot of people don't realize they're gamers, right?
Yep.
The Candy Crushers and the Mario players don't realize that they're included in that demographic.
Everyone's
of gamers.
included in that.
Yep.
And so when these investors look at these numbers holistically, they see a massive opportunity.
Right.
The problem with that was they threw all the money at it before the infrastructure was built out.
Right.
It was still very grassroots. The Overwatch League and Call of Duty League were the first big steps toward a franchise league, and I might add a developer-controlled franchise league.
Sure.
And that's a whole discussion in
On
and
its
of
own.
itself.
Right.
But the money came too quick before the revenue streams were built out. So they expected to capitalize on this massive market without having any of the revenue streams, without any of the infrastructure.
Right.
And Activision Blizzard specifically tried to make the NFL of video games without having leagues for kids to play football in, the equivalent.
Without little leagues, right.
Without little league,
Middle
and
school
without
leagues,
middle
high
school
school
leagues, high school
leagues.
leagues, collegiate
The
leagues.
pipeline, right.
Exactly, the pipeline as they call it.
Right.
So money came too quick, infrastructure wasn't built out enough, and so for every organization that was a part of that, their whole existence turned into what felt like a mad scramble to be profitable.
Right.
Like find a way to be profitable because investors expected it.
Yep.
And it took
using their
several
dollars.
more
Right.
rounds of investment, I think, for every big esports organization to even make a couple steps in the right direction.
Right.
But it never felt like it was enough.
Sure.
And a big signal to us of this reality was when our team in the Call of Duty League was the Dallas Empire.
Right, I
which,
remember.
again, rest in peace to
Rest
the
in
Dallas
peace.
Empire.
At least you got the ring, right?
Oh, I got a ring.
That's
Yeah, I
awesome.
got a ring.
That's the important part.
And honestly, one of the coolest brands I've ever seen in esports, and I'm honored to have been a part of creating it.
I was honored to be there alongside you guys at the moments I got to be. Yeah, because it was special.
And
Special,
helping
to say the
steer us
least.
away from being the Dallas Donkeys, which was a very real suggestion that
No
came
way.
up in
The
the
Dallas Donkeys? That sounds like I think my brother's baseball team growing up was the Swamp Donkeys. So that's pretty bad.
It didn't gain a lot of traction, but it was
Rightfully
it
so.
was mentioned very realistically in a
Oh,
meeting,
my
and I was like,
goodness.
oh no,
Thank
I'm
God
not
you were
gonna
there,
listen to this.
right?
So anyway, the Dallas Empire
Sure.
in the 2020 season of the CDL, which I believe was the inaugural year.
Yep.
We won the World Championship.
Yep.
We were the best in the world.
Yep.
And that was always the goal, and a big emphasis of Envy Gaming throughout its entire existence was we want to be competitive.
Right,
Each
competitive
organization
champions, right.
had its own thing. OpTic and FaZe were big on the content.
Right.
They were pretty competitive as
The
well.
Phase
but
100, right.
exactly.
Yep.
But we were focused almost entirely on being competitive and winning.
Right.
And we assumed that winning would equal this payout for
Right.
the company.
Right.
But we won the World Championship, and we didn't really get anything from it.
Really?
There was no massive cash influx because the prize money from the tournament goes to the players
Right.
primarily.
Right.
So we started to see as an organization, even if we're at our best, even if we win,
This isn't working.
we're not making money off of this.
Wow.
Not immediate money.
And
Obviously,
not as much as you
if you're
thought.
the best in the world, you gain fans and you can.
Of course.
But the thing is, you have to monetize those fans.
Right.
You have to find a way to do that.
Right.
And that wasn't built out yet.
Right.
And so, we took stabs at different things. There's obviously merch is the main one. There's
Yep.
membership clubs.
Yep.
There's
Collegiate.
There's live events.
Right.
Where it was going to be a big focus for us.
Yep.
And was.
Right.
And that was a big kind of source of revenue for us. I mean, sponsorship obviously is the big one
Obviously.
that keeps everyone afloat.
Right.
But yeah, we won the World Championship and we didn't see any sort of massive influx in money. And then we're like, all right, well, we need to rethink
Right.
how.
Well, tell me what
approach
those conversations are like when you're thinking about what your approach is going to be. Because what did you guys think was going to happen? Did you think the merch sales were going to jump? Did you think that more people were going to start watching the Twitch streams? What was the expectation after you win the championship? What's the disconnect?
I think from a competitive side, because Hastro and his team, and props to them, they were some of the best team builders
Sure.
I've ever seen.
Yep.
And Ian Houston, shout out to him.
Yep.
They built some
Ian's a great
insane rosters
Yeah.
for Call of Duty, for Overwatch, for Valorant, the
Sure.
World Championship winning Valorant team.
Yep.
The Halo team that's tearing up the Halo scene for the past 2 years.
You're
they
better
built.
than me there. Yeah, that's crazy.
So props to them, but they were really focused on being competitive.
Right.
And we were focusing on how do we monetize, right?
Building the brand. Right.
Building the brand.
Yep.
And so for us, on the kind of the brand building monetization side, it wasn't, can we win the whole thing, but can we be popular?
Right.
Because, the more eyes you have on you, the more money you make, hypothetically.
Sure.
That's
at least in sports.
So here's my issue with that, though, because that, as we got later and as we became OpTic, that was a big focus in our all-hands meetings. I remember our CEO was like, eyeballs. We're all about eyeballs. We need to get more eyeballs. And at that point, I was thinking, well, we've had a lot of eyeballs for a while. The problem isn't the eyeballs. Obviously, we'd love more, but the problem is turning these eyeballs into dollar signs. That's where we're coming up short.
Right.
And that's kind of where the company and my view of the direction we should be going split was they wanted strictly eyeballs. We need to get as many eyeballs as possible, spend as much money as we can to get there.
Right.
And just once we have the eyeballs, as many as we can get, then we'll figure it out.
Then we'll do something. Right.
But I was like, we need to make money now.
And
we need to find a way to do it.
Your
now.
angle was like, I've been here before. We've had the eyeballs.
We've had the eyeballs. Like, we need to find ways to convert them.
Right.
And in authentic ways.
Right.
Because there's kind of cheap ways to do it, and merch drops are easy. Merch drops are important, but they're the easy kind of fix, but it's never enough. Merch sales is a Band-Aid.
Yeah, and they're clothes, right? You can only wear so many T-shirts,
exactly.
right? Yeah, or own so many T-shirts, right?
And so live events was our big effort in that direction towards monetization, as if we can own a venue and host our own events out of it, so we're not paying a venue fee whenever we want to do one of these.
Right.
Ticket sales can be a big driver for us, and then if we own the venue, we can rent it out to concerts, shows, and that'll make incremental revenue on the side, so we don't, we're not struggling to host an event every 3 days.
Right.
So that was our big attempt, and that's around when my focus started shifting a lot more to events.
Sure.
And I became the event manager, and we took over Esports Stadium Arlington.
Yep.
Which is the largest dedicated esports facility in North America.
Sure. It's a beautiful place, too.
Beautiful place. A lot of great memories there.
Just going to say that. You beat me to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's and so that was our step in that direction.
Sure.
But while we were stepping in that direction, the company as a whole was kind of stepping in another direction. We acquired OpTic, which a lot of people don't know that that's the case.
Right, right. Yeah, Envy owns OpTic, and OpTic is just the existing brand because they're the more powerful brand.
Exactly.
Got that, right?
Because OpTic was more popular. They had so many more fans. They've been doing content for 15 years.
Right. It's them and FaZe. People can pretty much agree now, right?
Exactly.
They're kind of the titans of esports at this point. 100 Thieves is kind of catching up, but it's pretty
everyone
much FaZe
assumed that they had bought Envy for our infrastructure.
Right.
But, they OpTic had a rough few years.
Yep.
And then, our owners knew each other, and so we ended up acquiring OpTic, and then the branding of OpTic ended up taking over. But they never had the same emphasis on live events and building out the monetization revenue streams that we did.
Sure.
They were much more focused on, like I said, the eyeballs and making content. And so, yeah, I think there's a few different approaches that different organizations have taken, but I think the main issue with esports in what you say is the investor era, which again, I love that we call it that, because that's, I think the big issue is the money came too quick without having the infrastructure built out, without having the revenue streams built out, and the results were expected almost immediately.
Well, and I would say we're nearing the end of that investor era. Things are kind of starting to get back to normal, I would say, right? Pre-COVID, it's getting back to the grassroots of esports. Where do you feel like we go from here? Do you feel like it's a bad thing, what's happening with esports right now? Do you feel like it's a resetting? Where do we go from here, and is it good or bad?
I think the investor era of esports needed to end.
Sure.
And I hate to say that, and I'm not implying that we don't want any investors.
Right.
In
We love you, investors.
We love you, investors. We love you.
Right.
But the massive expectations that come with $50 million were not feasible.
Right.
And so I think the way people have looked at esports the past 5 years does need to end.
Absolutely.
The amount of money that a team needs to spend to acquire a player.
Right.
OpTic was going to have to pay $1 million to acquire Pred, a Call of Duty player, last year.
Right.
One player,
That's
$1 million.
Right.
And without the revenue streams, that's ridiculous.
Right. Especially when you turn around and give them all the money you win. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. They're getting all the winnings, and the organizations they don't have any. And another thing with the Activision Blizzard franchise leagues is they didn't the teams that bought in, the
Right.
teams that paid $25 million to be a part of this,
Right.
they expected some sort of revenue stream from the league.
Of course.
Which,
the same way that the Saints expect a revenue share from the NFL.
exactly.
Right.
And they didn't really have that
Sure.
built out. And there
Right.
wasn't anything in that department that was filling up the bank account.
Right.
So a lot of these teams have been struggling to pay their athletes, and they've had to bail on them and sign cheaper players because
Right.
they're going under, because you have to pay so much to the players to be competitively viable.
Right.
So I think Call of Duty is a great example of money coming in too quick. Player
Sure.
salaries went from $3,000 to $4,000 a month to $20,000 a month
Yep.
in a year,
year
and a
right.
half.
Yep.
And that's just unrealistic if you want to have sustainable growth. So I think the way that esports has been growing the past 5 years, and you see now big teams are starting to run out of money. I know
Right.
there's a few that I'm not going to say that only have a couple
They're
more
on the
months of
ropes.
money
Yep.
left.
Some of them have
operations.
written it out there, like Sentinels. They've got
Sentinels.
6 months left.
They
Right.
put it out there.
Yep.
They're barely hanging on.
That's it. Yep.
And so I think that will be good for esports in the long run,
Right.
because it will change how people view it. Esports is not a get rich quick kind of thing for anybody. For
Tell 'em.
investors, for individuals. There is not money to be made in esports super quickly.
Right.
There will be in the long term. I really do believe
40
that.
years from now.
But the reason the NFL, NBA, they're successful is, like we talked about earlier, they have the funnel,
Right.
the
pipeline.
The pipeline.
Right.
And so they have kids playing football, they have middle schoolers playing football, they have high schoolers playing football, they have colleges playing football, and they have these systems, these leagues built out. And so
Right.
I've
They've got
started to,
invested fans. Right.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
and another thing is, so many Cowboys fans are Cowboys fans because their dad was a Cowboys fan.
Right.
You know, and
Right.
esports hasn't been around long enough for people's
that to
parents
happen.
right now
Right.
to be fans of OpTic.
Right.
When our generation, in 10 years,
Right.
15 years, 20 years, once we get up there, you're going to have a generation of parents
Right.
who are OpTic fans,
Right.
or FaZe fans.
Right.
And that
That's
is
gonna be
going to
us,
bleed
right.
into their kids.
Exactly,
But we're
right.
not there yet.
Right. Exactly.
And so you can't expect these big franchise leagues, for one, to work financially until you have the foundation that you can build it on.
Sure.
And the foundation is fans.
Right.
And so I think long term, this is good for esports. We need it to crumble a little bit right now so that it can rise from the ashes like a phoenix. I mean,
Like a phoenix.
Like a phoenix.
Like the phoenix.
Exactly.
Sure, yeah.
So I think that's the reality of it. It's painful in the short term
Absolutely.
for a lot of people.
Yep.
And for me too. I left OpTic January of this year, just because the company was moving in a different direction.
Sure.
I'd been giving my heart and soul to this company for
For
5
years. I
years,
was there for all of
working
it, yeah. Not all
weekends
of it.
and holidays and weeks at a time without a day. Like, I was giving everything I had to this, and I saw them going in another direction, and I said, look, I'm gonna take care of myself for a little bit, get healthy,
you.
and see how this shakes out from the outside, because I think what happens after this will be sustainable.
Absolutely.
I think it's going to take time,
Absolutely.
obviously, but I have a lot of faith in gamers aren't going anywhere.
We're not.
Esports isn't going anywhere.
Nope.
People love this stuff.
Right. Play every day still.
We play every day. It's not going to go away.
Right.
But how it looks, how it's shaped, how it grows, I think is going to change a lot, and I think that's for the better.
So the future's looking bright. On
The
very
future's
end.
looking bright. It's again, short term, it's going to be painful. A lot of these organizations are going to run out of money and go under, and you're going to have to kind of revert back to the grassroots level of things, which I think some people, myself included, prefer. Honestly,
Absolutely.
I think it's healthier for each ecosystem, each game. I just think CWL, Call of Duty World League, compared to Call of Duty League, which is, the franchised version of it versus the open tournament
The
style.
gamers
of it.
prevailing, right?
Yep.
Yep.
I think the former CWL was way more sustainable,
Absolutely.
and way more enjoyable, and you
Yep.
could have way more buy-in. I could squad up with you in a team, show up to one of these events, and play.
And we can
if
be
we're
somebody,
good
maybe.
enough, we can play against the best players in the world.
Right. And that was
they took that away.
That was the draw. Right?
That was the draw.
And so hopefully we can get back to that sometime soon, right? Because you
That's-
think we will.
That's
right?
what I'm hoping.
Yep.
And I think Halo took a good step in that direction.
Agreed.
I disagree with a lot of how they approached their pro scene in
Sure.
the past year.
Right.
But one
think
thing I
everybody in
love
esports
that
does.
they did
Yep.
was leaving their tournaments open,
Right.
where anyone can join.
And
You
even
can-
Splitgate did that, even in their demise, where even left their things open, right?
Yep. Yeah, you can jump in any tournaments, open bracket, and if you win enough, you can play the best in the world.
Right.
So I think we're going to revert to more of that style, grassroots esports tournaments for a little while, and then I think those with the right support can grow into what we all envisioned esports would be.
Well, I hope we can get there. And until we get there, I think we can keep leaning on guys like you to give us a bright light into what that world's like. So
I hope so.
I appreciate your time today, dude.
Of course.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the insight. Thanks for the reel. And why don't you tell the people where to find you? I know we're talking about your ad, so why don't you tell them about your ad? Where to find you? How to get in contact?
Yeah, Will Connor on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it.
We'll call it Twitter.
Will CONNER_. Will Reardon04 on Instagram if you want to.
Follow him on the IG.
Yeah, I don't tweet very much. You'll see me on IG occasionally. I'm in my lurking phase where I'm plotting, I'm seeing what happens.
Writing a book right now about all the great things in esports.
I'm doing a lot of things. in the background, and we'll see what happens. I'm excited to see.
Us too, man. We'll follow him. And if you want to know about his book, it'll be coming out in the next, I'll say 3 to 5 years. That's a really high-end guess. So check out Will Connor's book. Check him out everywhere. Will, appreciate you today, dude.
Yep.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. If that's not a good reason to tune in each and every time, I don't know what it is. Get connected with the Esports Connection. Hear what's really happening in the scene today from the people really doing it. Streaming live from our studios here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.